As creative people, we can sometimes forget that what we're doing is actually important. We can lose sight of the fact that our ideas can have an impact on the world in ways that might be beyond our understanding. We can also get so fixated on our original ideas that we try to force things to conform to that vision instead of letting outside influences naturally shape the work, whether that's through unforeseen circumstances or the people that we're working with. I saw an interview recently with the actor Gary Oldman, and he was talking about working with different directors and the notes that they would give you, which is like when they call an actor aside and talk about their performance and what they could do differently. He gave the example of Christopher Nolan, who's one of my favorite directors, and he said in all the years that he's worked with him, he maybe called him aside twice. And on one particular scene that they were working on, he came up to him and he just said, "Let's try that one more time. There's more at stake." So this stood out to me in two different ways. The first thing is that it's pretty minimalist direction, I'd say. I mean, there's not a lot of information there, but yet there's some really important information. And in case you're wondering why my recording space looks so different now, this is a hotel room. I'm currently on the road. I was in Sweden and now I'm in Finland. So this is Helsinki. So the first reason that his direction stood out to me was the brevity of it, the fact that he says so little. When I'm rehearsing with my own band, I try to be as minimalist as I can when I have new music. I like seeing what happens when the musicians get a hold of my tunes for the first time and they don't know what to think. They just start to figure it out on their own. There's a process of discovery that happens when an artist interacts with a subject for the first time. And that's a special opportunity every time that I give a piece of new music to the band that I don't want to squander. Gary Oldman is a brilliant actor, and Nolan is obviously aware of that and knows the value of his raw interpretation of the script. When we're in a situation where we're collaborating with other creative people, whether that's other actors or musicians or designers and art directors, whatever the situation is, we need to see the value in our collaborators' interpretation of the work. But there's a delicate balance. We don't want to just hand off the stuff and say, "Here, just do whatever you want with it. I don't care." Because that's just not doing our job. So it's a tricky thing to find that balance, to trust our collaborators to run with their ideas, and yet maintaining some overarching vision of what needs to happen. As a musician, I can assert myself through the music to some extent and give direction just musically through ideas. And the people I play with, they pick up on that. So I have the luxury of nonverbal direction, which is much less confrontational. But sometimes a musician has an idea that falls outside of what I had in mind for the project, and I have to say no. But there are definitely moments when I say yes to things that I'm not sure about. And sometimes it's worth it just to say yes to keep things moving and also to give the other musicians ownership. And that's actually crucially important. When our collaborators feel ownership in what we're doing, that's when we get their best performance. So when I hear Gary Oldman recount these stories about Christopher Nolan, I immediately think of the mutual respect that they have for each other. The minimalist way that Nolan gave direction exudes respect. Like, you don't need me to say more than this because you're amazing at what you do. And that trust component is embedded in the psyche of the collaborator when we do that. It's like there's this message in the words that are said, and then there's a secondary message, maybe even a more important message in the words that aren't said. That's how we get great people to be really great for us. And I don't mean that in a smarmy, manipulative way, although I guess technically it is manipulation. But fundamentally, it's truthful, it's honesty. It's about us giving up control and power and ego for the sake of the work. So then the second way that Nolan's direction stood out to me were the words that he actually said. There's more at stake. That grabbed me. It felt like he was talking about all art, but I mean, I know he wasn't. It was specific to that scene, but it reminded me of this book that I read a long time ago about the avant-garde scene in New York, the avant-garde jazz scene in New York in the 60s. It was a book called As Serious as Your Life by Val Wilmer. It had a huge impact on how I viewed the music that I was listening to at the time, and still am to some extent. But it made me think of this whole equation differently. I mean, as serious as your life implies that, for one, my life is serious, and two, the art is serious and important. When we're feeling uninspired or maybe doing the work but lacking the commitment to it, that's when it's good to remember that phrase, there's more at stake. Or remind yourself that what you're doing is as serious as your life. Like in the movie Chef, I love that movie. But when Jon Favreau takes his son, the actor that's playing his son, off of the food truck and explains to him that what he's doing is important, that he says something like, I get to touch people's lives with what I do. And it's so true. There is more at stake. Whether we're serving Cuban sandwiches from a food truck or playing in a concert hall, our ideas, our craft, our life's energy is going out into the world and touching people in ways that maybe we don't even understand. But when we start to think like this, the danger is that we start to feel overly important, when actually it's the ideas, it's the work that's important. We're just lucky enough to be along for the ride. And we can't forget to have fun either. Even though it's important work, doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy it. If you enjoyed this episode, you'd probably also enjoy my new ebook, Necessarily Creative. I'll link it in the description. Or you can just go to book.scottmclemore.com. That's it for me from Helsinki. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep the flow.